go to the third generation, because these voting shares, again, another problem with that approach. I think it's a really good idea, but sort of quantifying what those voting shares are worth and what they've been worth when sort of all of the dividends and equity are weighted towards the third generation. That's obviously another key factor in this decision. But again, that's part of leveling that out is having a lot more G2 voice on the board, because G3 is going to be the ones getting this money if this decision is made.
The CFO that you have listed there, did you not say that you would be eliminating the CFO with the decision that you made?
Yes. And I think that just his stake there is sort of what does he feel, what does he want in his involvement. He's currently part of the business, and one of the routes that they were going to go, or one of the possibilities, is that we might start buying businesses instead of selling or liquidating. So that's why we want to include him as part of this decision. And also he would be helpful in evaluating the business's worth, which is, I think, sort of the two steps we had. Evaluating the business worth, we had the CFO involved. Evaluating the human capital of G3, we had the VP of HR involved. So it's just sort of splitting where we saw people's strengths were best.
But you're going to get rid of the CFO in the future process in this model?
Following our decision to sell,
yeah.
Yes. I mean,
but then why would you have, then the board's going to change at the end. If you go to the last screen where you talk about infinity and beyond, you're talking about, you know, setting up these annual meetings and this interest. They're no longer there, so now you've gone back to a 6 split. So now you have no decisions that'll ever get made because you could tie on a 3 and a 3?
They're a consensus-based family, actually, so the idea would be that that's what they would want, is for everyone to agree.
They haven't been in consensus now. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, I'm just...
Well, no, I am too. I'm just, yeah. Well, they haven't, I mean, the problem is they're obviously not a consensus-based family, because that's why we're in this situation. I mean, from the very first statement, it shows that there is no consensus because there's no inclusion. There seems to be isolation. And I'm bothered by the word that you say Ben is disengaged. I don't think he's disengaged. I think he's actually very actively engaged. The problem is I think he's very isolated, whether it's by himself or because of the interaction with the family. And so I have a concern that you would say we're going to have this happy little ending when we don't even have that with them now without those people involved in the board.
Within the case, something that it does say is that technically they only need 2/3 votes, but that even Ben, even though he wants out of this, he will ignore that because he wants consensus with his siblings. So while I agree that they may not be in consensus in actuality, what their values are consensus based.
So then why not, I'm going to interrupt you, because then why not go back to a 6-person board? If you only need 2/3 consensus, take the CFO out and leave it with the G3s and G2s and the one outside representative, and give the VP and the CFO fair stakes of not being on the board. If you don't need them now, or in the future, you don't need them now. And if you didn't need them then, you don't need them now. You can't have it both ways, I think.
I don't think that if you don't need them in the future, you don't need them now.
I think that there's a fundamental issue of getting this board to operate a little more clearly than, you know, yes, we're going to vote, but in reality we're consensus based, right?
Right.
And so I think there's a reality of this decision-making board has to be more effective than it is now.
Okay.
Okay. That's I think the point. If those two are on it, I'm indifferent to that personally. I think that it would inform the board a little bit, but I don't know if it would make a difference because of the way the family functions.
But don't you think there's a problem in that they're sitting here saying that they were making this model from a family-based approach, and they put a CFO on a family voting consensus board, but they won't put a person from the 300 employee representative on there? I mean, I don't know that this is a union industry, but it seems like you would have a person on it. I'm just saying, you can't make that. You may want to learn to not make that argument then, because I'm sitting going, well, you're doing it.
Dovetails to the whole communication of the plan to the business.
Well, and I think
that's that's really what you're talking about.
Yeah, and the principal point of bringing the CFO in was for his expertise in evaluating the business. I don't necessarily know that him having a vote or not, that could definitely go either way, but to bring in an employee representative would imply that you're bringing in every single stakeholder into that, and that's not necessarily the model they're using. Remember, they're an ownership first, not a management first firm.
Right.
So they're concerned with, you know, their dividends down the road. They sound like rich kids, but...
So if you have the CFO and the VP down at the bottom on that screen that was prior, doing this little chit chat with each other. Can we go back to that screen? I hate to say not know what I'm talking about, but I like to see the screen. Yeah, the VP and HR will assess each G3 member anonymously and present it to the board. Why not have them do the same thing with a 300, person representative, and have them present that to that board, but not as a voting member? Wouldn't that achieve all of these objectives and still keep the family?
Then you're harnessing the voice of the 300 employees.
But the decision still lies within the family.
Correct.
Entity.
Yeah.
So you still have it.
It helps to have the voice of all 300. I would agree with that.
And it makes it clear that they're not part of this family-based decision.
Yes.
Because they're only coming in with input from themselves, from their HR perspective, and from their VP perspective, and from the employee perspective, but it's still a family-based approach and consensus board.
The decision ultimately lies with the family, but a good assessment and analysis
that
is done by
supports your values
non-families.
approach, which is what you're trying to achieve in the end, is to
Mm-hmm.
perpetuate the values.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
And I think also using stakeholders, like people who are going to lose their job if they sell, that might be a bit of a conflict of interest, because they're definitely going to be predisposed to overestimating what the human capital is, so as to say, yeah, we're super valuable, please don't sell us and send us all home
but
and
also
fire
that's
us.
the case for the CFO in theory as well, though, is that he's also at stake to lose his job, so he's going to say, no, in
Right.
15 years from now,
Yeah,
this is going to be a...
And some of this is also dependent upon how the discussions go with Argo, right? Or whatever they're called.
Argus.
Right.
Argus.
Yeah.
Argus is going to say, yeah, we're interested in your employees. No, we're interested in evaluating your employees.
We're interested
No,
in
we're
firing
not
all
interested.
300.
I mean, there's a whole continuum of receptivity that Argus gets to drive on that point.
Are they offering to buy the name? Are they offering to buy the clientele? Are they offering to buy
It's
the...
communicated primarily that they're purchasing the physical assets and the plants and the equipment. It's not really clear as far as whether they would bring in their own employees or keep the employees that were there. That's not really something we chose to take liberty
Do you
with.
think a family-based business would want to at least have part of their game plan on there to think of considering how they would support their employees if it was not buying human capital, they weren't selling the human capital? Like, at least think about it. I mean, the fact that we may lose 300 employees, so we would at least maybe bring in, I don't know, a job recruiter to help them.
Right.
I mean, add that in that long-term plan as part of the perspective of when you sell, is that we are family-based. So one of our main values was to perpetuate the family. We do consider our employees part of our family. While we need to make this decision for the council, we also don't forget how we got to where we are. So we would bring in someone who would write resumes for them. I don't know. I'm just fabricating what it could be. But because you don't know. So don't you at least need to prepare for that? Or advise the council of that?
Yeah, and I think that as far as the values go, I don't want to make them sound heartless or anything, but again, like, they're not necessarily as concerned with their employees.
Mm-hmm.
This is, again, an ownership first. Their employees are obviously being taken into account as their value, and it would certainly not be a positive situation if you just had to fire them all. So within negotiations, they would obviously be going back and forth. The discussion of what would happen to these employees and what would happen to this human capital, pending its valuation by the VP of HR, would obviously be something that, went into a counteroffer or went into, another offer from Argus. That would definitely be part of the discussion.
Yeah, and I would simply title it as something that's long-term planning for the sellout, which could, and when you use that, it's an EG thing. It's example, seeking assistance to find our employees, other job opportunities. Making sure that if we had any retirement plans or all those are taken care of and set up so that we don't have to deal with them anymore because they're no longer tied to us. I will say, when I read the fact pattern, though, I do think that there is a very good argument that they are literally buying the interest of the region, because they're on the fringe of it. It says that there's nothing to say that they can't come in and take over the company. So it does lend itself to believe that they're buying simply the rights into the area and going to vacate the personnel and the the equipment, the overhead, and all of that. I know it's speculative, but it does
There's
seem
likely
that
to be
there's that
some
sentence in there
efficiencies
for a
that come
reason.
out of that.
Yeah, there's a sentence in there for a reason, and every sentence in here, I think, plays a part into what you could interpret it as.
Now, in terms of once you get to the recommendation and the family office starts exercising itself, what's the role of philanthropy within the structure?
The importance of not necessarily philanthropy, but values-based investing.
Okay.
And there's actually a technical term for that, which I'm forgetting. But so basically what this board is doing